It's time to talk about the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, the board game. That Mad Mage, he doesn't like people talking about his dungeon, let alone the adventure that takes place in his dungeon, let alone the board game based on the adventure that takes place in his dungeon. Dungeon of the Mad Mage, more like Dungeon of the Irate Mage. That's how angry he's gonna be. Sorry, I gotta take this. Good day or night to you. This is the Gaming Tome Cafe and Gift Shop. Me speaking. Oh, okay, that makes sense. All right, I'll tell them. Little mix up here. Apparently, it's not mad as in angry. That mage, he's just insane. Don't worry though, he's still gonna kill us all for talking about his dungeon. Oh God, what have I done? You know the drill by now. We're talking about the Dungeons & Dragons Adventure System, a series of cooperative board games with classic dungeon delving flavor. These games are like Dungeons & Dragons Light, with light spelled wrong. You know how that works. It's like Dungeons & Dragons, but with less of it. Each core game entry features a large assortment of unpainted miniatures representing heroes, villains, minions, and monsters, along with other components that could find use in tabletop role-playing games. These board games are a great way to expand your miniature collection and a fun painting challenge. I took up that challenge and painted the models that come in the latest entry in the series, Waterdeep, Dungeon of the Mad Mage, the board game. In this video, I will give a review from the perspective of a dungeon master and mini painter of the miniatures that come within this board game. I will share what I like and do not like about the models and discuss their usefulness within D&D and abroad in the greater world of miniature gaming. I will also touch upon my experience painting them and give my thoughts on the end results of those efforts. This will not be a review of the game itself, but rather the components. If you happen to be painting these minis yourself, then take a look in the description. I slipped a few important tips in there for getting a more durable paint job. Let's first get an overview of the board game. Releasing 2 years after the previous entry in the series, the Dungeon of the Mad Mage board game is based on the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons adventure of the same name. The game focuses around Undermountain, a 23-level mega-dungeon filled with all manner of beasts, traps, and strange characters. In the board game, the players control heroes descending into the halls of Undermountain to defeat the Mad Mage himself, along with his many diabolical creations and devious apprentices. The setting is sort of a funhouse dungeon, and that is in part reflected in the game's assortment of miniatures, of which there are 43 in total. As usual, I have divided them into 4 categories: heroes, goons and grungs, monsters, and villains. Let's start with the heroes. First is the human Paladin of the Oath of Vengeance. The model depicts an armored male human holding a long sword with both hands. This holy warrior wears a cape and sports a rather generous pompadour mullet combo hairstyle thing. I'm not a hairstylist, I don't know hair, I just have some. Post in the comments down below what you think this hairstyle should be called. The wide stance with locked legs and 2 hands on the sword held close to his body gives him a stalwart aura. He radiates confidence. I think that confidence comes from the hair. That's where he gets his powers. A paladin of the oath of hair that's a little too much. Somebody homebrew that. I gave the miniature a rather dreary paint job, consisting of dark brown leather and silver armor with a black cloak. I imagine a paladin that has taken an oath of vengeance could be a rather cold, driven individual. The hair is one of the leading features of the character, and I wanted to draw extra attention to it. I did so by painting it with a coat of warm yellow paint. This is a heroic looking model, but the neutral colors of his attire will allow the miniature to pass as a villain. Always remember, villains can have good hair too, or bad hair. Post in the comments if this is good or bad hair. This guy could be a prideful captain or noble working against the players in a D&D campaign. He could also be a bounty hunter chasing the party. Wait a minute, dark cloak. The hair. Bounty hunter? Of course. This may be a Dungeons & Dragons version of Dog the Bounty Hunter. This Oath of Vengeance Paladin is a great model for what it is meant to represent, and it should work well for many other heavily armored classes. It is a versatile mini dripping with character. And all that character is coming from that hair. Are we sure this guy is real? How do we know that the man is not just a meat puppet being controlled by the hair? It's like Ratatouille, but the hair was the API between rat and man. We got rid of the rat. We didn't need the rat anymore. Get that rat out of there. Ew. The hair was the middleman in this situation, but you get rid of the rat and have the hair be the rat, then you've got a direct line of communication there. Much more efficient. Reduce overhead. That hair is going to be so much more efficient at controlling that man than that rat could ever have been. Paladins are a little much, and we could be here all day. Let's move on. Next up is the Elf Cleric of the Grave. This model depicts a lighter armored, pointy-eared male humanoid. The elf is wielding a short spear and wearing what looks like a guitar on his back. Some sort of cloth piece is tied around his waist. I'm not sure what this is, but it has some interesting details that I painted gold, along with a few trinkets also hanging from the waistline. There is a lot going on with this model, and that is good for finding reasons to bring it to the table. Those decorations on the clothing make me think of a merchant, or maybe even a monk. I actually want to use this mini for both of those things. Good news is that the armor is not a prominent feature. If I were to paint this again, I would try recoloring the scale sleeves and skirt. Then it could pass as textured, dyed clothing. The more I look at this model, the less certain I am about that armor. The pre-painted version has those features colored silver, but I feel like they could just as easily look like a gambeson coat. Now that I think of it, I am not sure if I even have a miniature that is wearing gambeson armor. We need more gambeson armor. Armor aside, another thing this model has going for it is the guitar. Now, when you see a model with a musical instrument, naturally you think that is a bard. But the model is not a bard. It's a cleric of the grave, so maybe he only plays at funerals? So what if this model is called a cleric? We don't collect these little plastic figures for their names, we collect them for what they look like, and this elf looks like a versatile addition to a dungeon master's toolbox. We move on to the Tiefling Battlemaster, which depicts a female humanoid with a devilish tail. She wears chainmail armor and wields a sword and large, round shield. I painted the armor a dark gunmetal with brown cloth and leather components. Sometimes I choose a less colorful paint scheme for a more gritty function over appearance kind of look. Other times I do it because bright, colorful clothing can resemble livery of an organization, and I don't want that character to look like they're officially serving ruling lords or guilds. In this case, I kind of wanted like both. I wanted the Battlemaster to look like an adventurer with no ties to political powers in the world. However, I also wanted them to look like they could be a soldier of Avernus devoted to Tiamat. It's a little contradictory. As far as deity symbols go, Tiamat's symbol is pretty geometric, so it could be interpreted as nothing more than a stylized star. Looking over the outfit, I noticed that this armor is not quite like any of my other miniatures. I don't know enough about armor to place this, but it looks awesome. The pose is pretty good too. It is a happy middle between idle and action. It is great to finally add another tiefling to my collection, as well as a shield bearer. the Tiefling Battlemaster is my favorite among the models in this category. The human Storm Sorcerer depicts a male, unarmored, arcane spellcaster conjuring some magic between his hands. I painted this slightly more modern-feeling outfit with various shades of blue and added a ring of bright orange around the wrists. Those rings of color are for style, but additionally so everyone can watch those hands. He is a Storm Sorcerer after all. He's got magic powers. If he starts waving those hands, start running. Don't let him wave those hands. At the last feast, the Storm Sorcerer got drunk and started getting a little too fancy with those hand gestures. Next thing you know, there's a lightning bolt going through the window, and stained glass is expensive to replace. Don't let the sorcerer wave his hands. Can we get some handcuffs for this guy? My first instinct was to paint that wisp of magic like fire or water, but I decided to go for light gray mist for a change. Getting back to the outfit, I like having spellcaster minis with long flowing wizard robes, but I also appreciate these slightly more form-fitting, more modern clothes like this model has. It kind of conveys a sense of youth for the character. I can think of a number of uses for this model. He could represent a newer generation of wizard, or maybe a young scholar, a noble, or maybe a member of a royal court. I'm picturing royal advisor, but with a few magic tricks up his sleeves. This is certainly not the most heroic model, but it will surely clock in some time at the table. The fifth and final player character mini in this board game is the Gnome Inquisitive. The model depicts a short female humanoid dressed in an outfit that reminds me of Indiana Jones. She better be quick. Those little legs are not gonna help when that big boulder chases her down the hallway. This Inquisitive is holding a magnifying glass and something stick-shaped. The details get fuzzy on these small miniatures, but that can be liberating. Depending on how this is painted, the gnome could be holding a stick, or a wand, or a club. The choice is yours. Based on that classic adventure outfit, my first guess was that it is a torch, so I topped it off with a little orange and yellow paint. This is probably the coolest gnome or halfling model I have seen to date. This could make for an awesome tabletop representation of an explorer-themed rogue, fighter, ranger, or one of the many lightly armored spellcasting classes. I could also see myself using this model to represent an odd NPC the party encounters in the middle of nowhere, the kind of unexpected but welcome trader that conveniently shows up when you are alone in the wild. The Gnome Inquisitive is certainly one of the better player character models I have seen. That concludes the heroes of this game. Now we move on towards more hostile humanoids. First in this category is a group of thugs. The game comes with 4 of these tall, heavily armored goons. 3 of them wield heavy maces, while the leader holds a large crossbow at the ready. These models are based off the 5th edition artwork of a thug found in the Monster Manual. The artwork shows them wearing what could either be black leather or metal plate armor. I deviated in painting these by going for a brown leather with silver plate. I kept the cloaks yellow though because I liked the look. I like the weaponry of these models. The heavy maces are big, blunt instruments of harm. A perfect fit for these brutes. The heavy crossbow is also an excellent choice. I don't know about you, but I always picture crossbows to be sort of the common man's bow, and I mean that as in anyone can pick it up and shoot it. It gives off similar vibes to those maces. This is also probably one of the best crossbows I've seen on an official D&D miniature. Usually crossbows, they end up bent and warped, but this one has a robust size and shape that is holding up well. These minis and the artwork they are based upon inspired me to add an antagonistic mercenary company to my D&D setting. They are known as the Golden Company. This organization sells the idea that they are bringers of peace and security for the right price, but it would not take much to see that they really are just a bunch of bullies and thugs with matching outfits. I like the yellow cloaks because it feels like these guys are trying to clothe themselves in a bright, happy color as a feeble attempt to paint themselves as the good guys. However, yellow is also a symbol of cowardice, and that is fitting because these mercenaries are not brave. They are dumb muscle with numbers, and they leverage that to get what they want. When the tide turns against them, they are not going to hold their ground. This is one of my favorite official D&D models of all time, and the reason is because of the solid character design in the artwork they are based upon. There are so many parts to that image that synergize: the tall stature of the figure, the bulky physique covered in armor, the simple, heavy weaponry. It all comes together to precisely convey that this person is a brute, a bully, a thug. It does what it is trying to do so well and consistent, and I am so glad that that piece of artwork has been given physical form as a miniature. Next up, we have a similar grouping of 4 models, but this time they are veterans. The minis depict long-haired, armored humans with capes. They are posed, half crouching down as they ready one-handed sweeps of what look to be longswords. One of the veterans is labeled as a leader. This time, though, the leader is dual-wielding swords rather than being equipped with a ranged weapon. And I like this contrast because the thug's leader has the ranged weapon like he's a coward. He doesn't want to be up in the action. He wants to shoot people from far away. Whereas the veteran leader, he's honorable, he's brave, he's got 2 swords. He's like, let me at him. I'm not going to sit back there and give commands. I'm going to get into the fight with my fellow troops. These 2 groups also contrast in physique. The veterans are much thinner and have more dynamic poses. Just overall, they look more heroic. They don't look like basic troops. They look like the best of the best. If they were not considered enemies in the board game, I would think these are the good guys. I gave them blue cloaks while keeping most of the other colors the same as the thugs. Looking at the way their left arms are held up, I wonder if it was ever planned for these models to be holding shields. Their forearms seem perfectly placed to block an incoming strike. I could see why this detail might be cut, though shields would make them look less elite and more like common foot soldiers. The fact that they don't need that extra protection of the shield says something about them. It reinforces the idea that they are experienced, highly skilled fighters. I will probably use these for elite city guards or knights in a royal palace. The veteran leader certainly deserves some cool abilities related to his dual wielding. These are good general purpose models that will be welcome to many Dungeon Masters collections. The rest of the models in this category are much less human. The Grung miniatures depict small frog people. They wear a piece of shoulder armor and are holding daggers. The game comes with 4 Grungs, one of which is armed with a bow and quiver of arrows in addition to their blade. These guys are kind of cute with their big eyes and tiny weapons. I painted them a long time ago, so I don't know why I chose such a simple color scheme. I really should have taken a note from the official artwork, which shows them in a variety of colors with spotted skin patterns reminiscent of poison dart frogs. Maybe I was going for drab, swampy frog people. Whatever my reasoning, it was the wrong choice. These could have looked so much cooler. If these do make it to the tabletop, they will probably be a neutral or maybe even friendly tribe living in a swamp or along a jungle river. I cannot picture these guys being hostile to a party of adventurers, at least not at first. They are just too cute. On the other hand, a Dungeon Master should not underestimate a player's ability to offend the locals. That Grung will not look so cute when it is cheering as the flames lick the party's healer who has been tied to the central post of the bonfire. These are an interesting inclusion in the board game. They are not what I would expect from a subterranean mega dungeon. Then again, Undermountain is a huge, weird place full of strange things. Anything can happen. This game comes with 3 hags. That's a hard one to say. The Gaelic pronunciation would be Vayer with a V, but I don't speak Gaelic. I'm gonna say Bayer. or burr. I'm gonna say one of those. Cottage cheese is the devil, risotto is rice that gave up on life, and I don't speak Gaelic. These are the hills I will die upon. Stupidity aside, this awesome sculpt depicts a woman in bulky clothes with a large scarf wrapped around her head and over her shoulders, while a few strings of skulls dangle from her side. This sculpt is clearly based off the 5th edition official artwork of the creature. One hand holds a gnarled wooden staff, while the other stretches out, revealing uncannily long arms. The model is posed to really show off those creepy arms. She's either reaching out to cast a spell, or to pat the head of a horrifying pet, or her soon-to-be victim.
Oh, don't worry about that, dearie. It'll all be over soon. My pet Snugglepuff will deal with you.
Bayer hags are winter-themed witches with blue skin, an arsenal of chilling powers, and a hunger for frozen flesh. But not when I paint them. I decided to paint them completely different. I went with olive green skin, however, I shuffled the colors of their clothing amongst the three, and hair for variety. Normally this category of creature is best for a solo encounter, but hags can form covens, so I'm actually really happy there are 3 in this board game. I definitely want to run hags in future D&D adventures. They can fit all sorts of roles, ranging from a strange but not necessarily hostile hermit looking to make a deal, all the way up to legendary evil spellcaster that eats children and torments the surrounding lands. When I inevitably run a hag as a boss fight, I would like the battle to be multi-staged and have the middle of the fight focused around those creepy long arms. Perhaps she will start reaching across the room for potions on shelves and start bombarding the players with them, or maybe she will leap up into the rafters and start reaching down and pulling individual player characters up to face her alone. This is easily my favorite official hag miniature. Green skin and an evil cackle make an okay witch, but those arms are so long they seem inescapable. They take the model from being spooky ha-ha to genuinely terrifying. That concludes the Goons and Grungs category. Now we move on to more monstrous minis. First up are the shadows. These models show a dark form stretching up from the ground into a vaguely humanoid shape with a ghostly head and 2 reaching arms. I painted all 3 solid black. It was tempting to dot their eyes with red and orange, but complete and utter darkness is this creature's one defining feature. There have not been many official models of shadows over the years, which is surprising because as far as D&D monsters go, I consider the shadow to be up there with other iconic undead like wraiths and banshees. The times it has been realized in plastic, though, always seem to do it justice. One of my favorite pre-painted miniatures of all time is a shadow all the way back from 2007's Night Below set. That version looks like a more wispy, almost skeletal specter. This more recent take on the shadow is a tall, looming spirit ready to envelop and snuff out its prey. One nice touch is how the model attaches to the base not at the center, but rather in an arc along the edge. This makes it easy to put other models on the shadow's base, like it is intruding into their space to grab them. I do wish the arms of this sculpt had the elbows a little higher, like the creature's about to plunge its claws down on someone. Instead, it kind of has this like ghostly reaching out wave thing going on. This model appears to take inspiration from the 5th edition Monster Manual art for the creature, but has more distinguishable arms. I kind of wish the arms were tucked straight down on the sides, blending into the body to give the creature a simpler overall shape, like we see in the official artwork. These shadows are superb spectral minis, and the good news is that similar unpainted transparent sculpts are available through the Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures line. Predatory piles of slime make for interesting encounters. This game includes one such creature in the form of the Grey Ooze. This mini depicts a lumpy blob with 3 emerging pseudopods of varying length. I like the shape of this slime. The pseudopods are unnerving, and the little grabby mouth on the end of one of them is a nice touch. I painted this model gray with a black wash to stay true to the title of the creature, but this model will look good. Pretty much any color. Even baby yellow. Ochre Jelly is a Dungeons & Dragons creature. If that unpleasant color can work, any color will work. I completed the model with a coat of gloss varnish to give it a glistening wet appearance. Slimes have some of the simplest paint jobs. Their shape is pretty much non-existent. They don't have a shape. It's just a blob of goo. They need a little something extra to pop on the table. Don't pop them. What was I saying? Right. They need a little something extra. A little bottle of gloss varnish is a great thing to have for these situations. Simulate that wet sheen. It completes the model. Oozes and slimes are classic dungeon lurkers, and the inclusion of one in this game is a big plus. Next up are the intellect devourers. These tiny models depict brains with 4 legs. They're little nightmares often created by mind flayers as hunters to search tunnels nearby their illithid colony, or as spies that literally infiltrate, impersonate, and consume the minds of their victims. This has to be the smallest miniature I have ever encountered. It is so small that I feel like it's not worth owning. The details already get fuzzy on goblin and halfling miniatures. These walking brains are even smaller, so it is no surprise that they have even less detail. I think the modeler was trying to keep the brain part of the creature's body at scale to the head sizes of other miniatures in the line, but this is too small. I don't care if it's a deviation from lore. I want these creatures bigger. Make them bigger. I want to look at it and be able to tell what it is. What is worse is that this game comes with 6 of them. There is no other miniature across the entire Dungeons & Dragons Adventure System board game series that have this many duplicates. They are taking up the space of 2 minion-type creatures in this game. On top of that, this is a terrible choice of creature to have extra duplicates. Intellect Devourers are glass cannons with the ability to kill a player character in 2 turns thanks to their creepy abilities. It would already be excessive for a Dungeon Master to deploy 3 of these creatures in one encounter. 6 is ridiculous. I like Intellect Devourers as a monster, but I do not like the execution of this mini, nor do I appreciate this quantity included in the game. I would much rather have 6 of the next mini, the Flying Sword. These models depict what look like floating one-handed swords. It is a simple but cool idea for a creature that I could easily see myself deploying in groups. Imagine infiltrating a wizard's tower or a wealthy noble's manor, only to be chased out by a trio of magic blades that fly out of the display case. Pair these with a rug of smothering and some other animated object-style enemies, and you have yourself a magical ambush combat encounter. These are a nice addition to a collection, but they are also the kind of thing that I would use tokens to represent. Still better than the Intellect Devourers, though. Next up is my favorite model from this category, and one that I need to preface with a little backstory. Beholders have been around since the first edition of Dungeons & Dragons, and in that time, artists and sculptors have rendered these alien beings many times over. One thing that sets these monsters apart from other classic creatures is how their variety of physical characteristics has widened over their many years of portrayal. Sometimes beholders have more spherical bodies, other times they are more like a humanoid head shape. Sometimes they have skin, and other times they have chitinous plates or thick reptilian scales. The eye stalks can be smooth tentacles like those of a snail. They can also appear segmented like an insect, or knobby and multi-jointed. They can have horns too. Their facial expressions can vary from the way they glare at you with that big eye, or how their mouth is posed in a sinister grin, a disgusted scowl, or wide open to roar or take a bite. Beholders come in all shapes and sizes, but I am opinionated. There are certain versions of parts of a beholder's anatomy that I do not like, and it seems like every beholder miniature has at least one of those features. I love the artwork, I don't love the miniatures. I am picky because I care. I find beholders to be one of the coolest creatures in all of Dungeons & Dragons. Unfortunately, there was not a beholder miniature for me, one that I actually wanted. That is, until now. Introducing the Beholder Zombies. The game comes with 2 of these aberrations, depicting cycloptic floating heads with additional eye stalks emerging from the upper sides and a row of horns emerging along the jawline that encompasses an open maw of sharp teeth. There's a lot I like about this miniature: the shape of the head, the creased and cracked thick leathery skin, which is devoid of insectoid traits. I don't like beholders that kind of look like an insect. I like the knobby, multi-jointed eye stalks. I like the mouth that is agape, but not in an overexpressive grin or snarl. Finally, this is the perfect alignment of features that I want in a beholder model. The only downside is that this model is meant to represent an undead beholder. Thankfully though, the sculptor has limited the decaying body's damage to a few cracks in the skin around the mouth, a couple of missing teeth, and a potentially bit-off tongue. These are all features that can be easily overlooked if you paint the model with a more lively color scheme. That is what I did. I painted one with a reddish-brown skin similar to the artwork in the 3rd edition Monster Manual, and the other was painted purple for a more alien look. These were one of the few miniatures I was really excited about, so I painted them early. Like really early. So early that I've learned a lot since I painted them, and their paint job is okay. Looking back, I could have done a lot better. One thing is the horns, which they kind of look like a beard. I could have painted them a different color so they would stand out. Also, the skin could have been improved with a layer of highlight dry brushing for more depth. Despite those color omissions, these totally not zombified beholders are among my favorite models in my entire collection. Being aberrant creatures, these beholders could easily find use in other genres of role-playing games. They can be Lovecraftian abominations in a horror game, or weird aliens in a sci-fi or future fantasy setting. This is a great model for a Dungeon Master to have, and a spectacular inclusion in the set. The next model is yet another beholder, but unfortunately, the universe seeks balance. The last model was awesome. This next one does not deserve my enthusiasm. Not even a bit. The Death Tyrant depicts a giant floating skull with one eye socket surrounded by a spectral cloud of eyes. This would be a cool miniature if the ghostly cloud didn't look like a pan full of fried eggs. Pre-painted versions of this model look a little better, with this feature being made of transparent plastic. Even better though are the unpainted versions, which instead connect the ghost eyes to the skull using thin transparent stems. This probably all comes at the cost of making that model more fragile, but I would have preferred that 100 times over this haunted sunny side up skull. Even a plain beholder skull without the ghost eyes would be better. At least then I could chop it off the base and use it as scenery. The skull part is pretty good. The rows of sharp teeth and horn-lined jawbone are nice. The wide open mouth looks like it is trying to roar. I struggled picking colors for that cloud of eyes, and in the end I made the wrong choices. Maybe a toxic green ghost cloud would have looked better. The Death Tyrant is a very specific variant of beholders, and not one that I think the average Dungeon Master is looking for. Even if you disregard the previously mentioned flaws, this is one of the weakest models in the set. The final creature in this category is a construct known as a Scaladar. The model depicts a huge scorpion-shaped machine shooting a spray of lightning from the tip of its tail. I appreciate all the little rivets on this construct, especially like the boxy robot legs and the circular joint hinges connecting those pieces. I painted the metallic body with a coat of silver, followed by a couple washes of orange and brown paint to give it a tinge of rust. I find the results to be satisfactory, but not particularly eye-catching. The best part, though, is that lightning, of course. The flattened six-pronged fork of electrical power has a suitable size considering the body of the creature that is emitting it. I would hate for this giant robot to have a tiny electrical arc or an unwieldy long bolt. This lightning spray is perfectly sized, it looks great, but man do I wish it was removable. Because the model would look great either way. I gave the lightning a light teal base coat and then highlighted it with a dry brushing of white. That is all it took. It looks nice and was easier than I thought. The idea of giant robot version of insert animal name here is up there among the most generic monster ideas ever, but it's also an idea that could bring the model to the tabletop more. This creature's plain old rule of cool. I could picture it being inserted in all sorts of adventures. And that leaves us with one more category: the villains. This category is populated with named antagonists the heroes may encounter in the Mad Mage's subterranean sprawl. First among these is Arcturia. The model depicts a female humanoid with 6 fairy-like wings. She wears a long skirt or dress with a cloth mantle covering her shoulders and upper back, and a conical hat atop her head. Arcturia was once an apprentice to the so-called Mad Mage. She used magic to give herself beautiful blue scales and wings. Later, she was killed and reborn as an amalgamation of worms that attempt to maintain a somewhat human form. This model shows her in her magically altered state before she became a wriggling mass. I deviated from the official artwork and gave the model a more human fairy color scheme. The clothing got an array of earthy colors and the wings a simple gray. I like the clothing on this model in particular. It looks just right for a fairy. The style of hat is a nice feature that I have not seen before on a D&D model. This model would be excellent for a Fae NPC or druid. Maybe the players must seek out this powerful sage for advice on their quest. It could also be a fun new take on an evil witch. Perhaps this witch can be beautiful and not a hideous troll lady for once. Also, she could cast Fly on herself and the DM could flavor it as causing those insect-like wings to sprout from her back. This is a very unique character and a surprisingly good mini. Sharply contrasting the Fae-human hybrid is Trobriand. The model depicts what appears to be a large animated iron golem holding a ball of fire in one hand and shooting a fireball from the other. Trobriand is another apprentice of the Mad Mage. He is a human mage with a specialty in metal magics. The Skaladar and this golem are some of his creations. Actually, both of these would be good for a game run in a futuristic setting. This could be a giant robot suit for the villain, and the Skaladar could be his evil war machine. If you look closely at Trobriand, there is a tiny skull on the front of this miniature. I wonder if Trobriand has turned himself into a demi-lich, and this golem is like the body housing his skull? I don't know. I didn't read Dungeon of the Mad Mage: The Adventure. Tell me if I'm right in the comments. I painted the model a dark gunmetal with bronze in the intricate recesses around the head and upper back. The flames were hastily colored with a patchwork of bright yellow and orange. This is another creature that I am picky about. I like the proportions and body shape on this golem much more than the standard Iron Golem design. The arms and legs are less chunky and blocky. The official artwork of the Iron Golem has this profile that resembles Warhammer 40k Space Marine suits. I just don't like that geometry. This sculpt, on the other hand, is good, and those fireballs take this mini to a whole nother level. The standard Iron Golem will tank hits, swing a big sword, and occasionally breathe poison on its enemies, but if that does not excite you, then use this model for inspiration and swap out that poison breath for fire jet gauntlets. And maybe don't stop there, just keep adding gadgets and gizmos to this thing, make it a war machine. I like to think that every wizard who builds themselves an Iron Golem would be arming them with their own unique assortment of magical weaponry and powers. This model is top tier as far as golems go. Next up are two more heavily armored foes, Desmir and Zalthar Shadowdusk. The miniatures depict two human figures covered in plate mail bearing swords and shields. Supposedly, these siblings are Death Knights. I decided to go for dark bronze plates with gunmetal colored chainmail and shields. I snuck a little color into these dreary knights by painting the sword hilts gold and their helmet plumes red. These models are alright, but they don't stand out. They do not look worthy of representing named villains on the tabletop. I'm not familiar with the Dungeon of the Mad Mage adventure, so I don't know what role these two characters play in the story, but regardless of their position, Zalthar and Desmir in miniature form look okay as evil tanky infantry, and the models will probably look just as good painted as glorious good knights. Like these two. Now for something far more unique and terrifying. Moiril, the former bodyguard turned apprentice to the Mad Mage, is rendered in miniature form as a giant 8-legged scorpion with a chitinous, humanoid upper torso emerging where the scorpion's head and pincers would be. The creature's arms clutch an exquisite greatsword, which looks much smaller in the abomination's scaly clutches. Moiril is like a centaur except scorpion instead of the horse part. I really like how there is no sharp edge where the scorpion and humanoid parts meet. This is one of the problems I have with centaurs and driders. I see it as lazy creature design when you just take a human, cut off their legs, and attach them to an animal body. The fix for that, though, is to properly blend the features between these two parts. And that's what has been done with Moiril here. Moiril's insect features blend into the human part by having the upper torso encrusted in insectoid plates that look like a natural suit of armor. I painted this abomination similar to the 5th edition artwork using yellow and drab brown for the body. This is one of the coolest, creepiest miniatures I have seen. I'm sure that I will deploy this mini for a boss fight in some adventure. Perhaps this could be a divine guardian sent by a desert god to guard an ancient ruin, or a devoted priest that has been given this form to destroy their god's enemies. Moiril is a highlight of this set, even though they printed his name wrong. The bottom of the miniature says Muriel, which is so much easier to remember and say, but unfortunately it is incorrect. It is actually Moiril, spelled M-U-I-R-A-L. At the end of the day, though, I don't think the name is the thing people are going to remember about this guy. He's half man, half scorpion. 100% gross. Don't invite him to the party. This is one of the freakiest miniatures I've ever seen, and I love it. The final miniature in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage board game is the Mad Mage himself, Alistair Blackcloak. The model depicts an old male human wizard holding out a rod with a dragon head at each end. This is a good old-fashioned wizard if I've ever seen one. I like the big beard and poofy hair, which I painted white. The colors I chose for the robes were similar to some Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition artwork I found of Alistair. Red for the inner layer and dark brown for the outer layer. The outer robe is dotted with vague shapes that are supposed to be eyes and mouths. At first I thought this was a cloak Alistair made from the skin of his enemies. But come on, he is mad, but he's not crazy. There's a difference. This is supposed to be a robe of eyes, but the addition of the mouths is far too reminiscent of gibbering mouthers to be a coincidence. I'm guessing that Alistair was driven mad by some evil presence, and that insanity also manifested physically in his robes. Unfortunately, the detail is a little too fuzzy. I ended up painting them as discolored patches, like Hallister's robe is in tatters and has been repaired over and over again. Robe in tatters? Dumbledore is not going to be pleased.
Minus 10 points from House Blackcloak for Hallister's robe being in tatters. Also, while I'm at it, plus 42 points for House Gryffindor for Harry Potter being such a cool dude. I love you.
The pose is nice too. The way he is holding that scepter looks like he is casting a spell or commanding a group of cultists, or maybe a big scary monster.
Destroy them, my creature! Kill them all!
Hallister is also known for possessing a collection of enchanted flying blades. Naturally, the miniature comes with an optional extra piece that slots into the back of the base representing those floating blades. The daggers appear to have been upgraded to swords for this model. It's a cool spell effect that makes me really want to lean into building out that part of the encounter. If I ever run a campaign with Hallister Blackcloak as the main villain, the final battle, I'm just gonna flood the room with flying swords, okay? The players are gonna have to fight their way through a sea of floating blades just to get close to this evil wizard. This is a useful miniature for representing both good and bad wizards on the tabletop, thanks to the blurred features of the robe. If that robe was more detailed, we would have a problem saying this guy is good. Wait a minute. You seeing this? Is that wizard wearing the cloak made from the skin of his enemies?
Nah, probably not. It's so blurry I can't tell for sure. Whoever painted this really mucked up the job. I mean, it's so much muck. It's all muck. So much of it. Everywhere. Muck.
We have covered all the miniatures in this board game, but it would be a shame if I did not address another potentially useful component to a Dungeon Master: the set of interlocking dungeon tiles. The trend of great-looking tiles continues with the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. The artwork on these tiles is on par with the previous two games. This time, they are split between rubble-strewn corridors and damp, partially lit caves. The stone corridor pieces almost have this warm grayscale feel to them, like an aged photograph. The cave pieces are my favorite. These are far different than any other cave tiles I have come across. They show a floor of rock covered with patches of dirt or sand that is dotted with stalagmites, teal blue puddles, and the occasional vine or bioluminescent fungi. What really sets these tiles apart, though, is the lighting. Normally, cave tiles are the same brightness all over. These have simulated lighting in the form of soft-edged bright spots, like sunlight is punching through the ceiling, and also streaking shadows, like light is coming from off to the side and is obscured by a row of stalagmites. The color of the light is a warm yellow that resembles sunlight more than torchlight. This is not what I would expect for a multi-leveled subterranean mega dungeon. The culmination of these features make me picture mountain grottos, ravines, and cave entrances penetrated by morning autumn light. These tiles are a beautiful subversion of expectations for the setting, and that split between stone halls and rocky caves gives more variety for a dungeon master. The downsides of using these tiles outside of this board game are the puzzle piece edges, which may not merge well with other tile sets. There's also many symbols on the tiles, which have meaning in the board game, but do very little for the aesthetic. It would have been much better if the symbols were incorporated into the tile artwork as carvings in the stone, rather than being a bright, clean graphic stamped on top. On a positive note, these tiles are perfect for generating random dungeon layouts. Do not overlook these tiles. They are worth consideration for those looking to expand their tools for running D&D. Like the adventure this board game is themed around, this game's miniature assortment is a funhouse. There's no definite overarching theme, just fun, weird, and useful models. The playable character minis are far from the classic assortment of creatures and have quite a lot of character. There are a few general purpose models such as the thugs and veterans, but also classics valuable to most dungeon masters. Some of these minis have awesome sculpts, like the shadows, those hags, and the beholder zombies. The game has its share of disappointments though. I'm looking at you, sunny side up beholder, and you too, swarm of intellect devourers. Seriously, 6 is too many. The rest of the set is filled with unique, eye-catching villains and their bizarre creations and contraptions. Those parts of the set are not really something that you seek out as a DM, but when you have them, they become a source of inspiration and eventually find their way into your game. The mix of unique, weird, and useful models is above average, with many of the models being good and great, and very few being bad, although the ones that are bad are really bad. I'm talking about you, Breakfast Beholder. And you too, Swarm of Intellect Devourers. 6 is too many. You're taking up space. Get out of here. The Dungeon of the Mad Mage board game may have the weirdest, most fun roster of miniatures out of the D&D Adventure System board game series so far. But what do you think? Leave a comment down below. And finally, I'm all caught up. There are no more core game entries left in this series for me to review the miniatures of. For now, we're not done here. I'll be back. Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to those of you who have been watching all the way from back when I did that first miniature review in this game series, Castle Ravenloft, spooky game there. These videos have gotten a lot more complex since then, and I'm excited for what comes next. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep making and keep playing. Have a good one.